Sections 8 and 9 of the Doctrine and Covenants belong together as two parts of a single intriguing episode involving Oliver Cowdery and his efforts to translate the Book of Mormon. Here's the backstory. On the 7th of April, 1829, Joseph and Oliver had begun their sacred labor together of translating and scribing the Book of Mormon. Some short way into their translation efforts, Oliver had asked Joseph to inquire of the Lord on his behalf, which resulted in D&C 6. Wherein the Lord promised Oliver, among other things, that if he desired, he would be granted the gift to translate even as my servant Joseph. Joseph said it wasn't too long after Section 6 was received that Oliver Cowdery became exceedingly anxious to have the power to translate bestowed upon him as promised. Joseph therefore inquired of the Lord on Oliver's behalf, and D&C 8 was received in response. So that's the backstory to Section 8. Now let's look at the message of the revelation itself. In Section 8, Oliver is told by the Lord that he has two related gifts, both of which are relevant to his desires to translate. The first gift the Lord calls the Spirit of Revelation, and the second he calls the gift of Aaron. The way this first gift of the Spirit of Revelation works, the Lord explains, is that if Oliver will ask in faith with an honest heart, believing that he shall receive, he will be given a knowledge concerning the engravings of ancient scriptural records, referenced previously in D&C 6 verses 26 and 27. This knowledge will be given by the Lord in Oliver's mind and in his heart by the Holy Ghost, which will come and dwell in his heart. This, the Lord explains, is the Spirit of Revelation. He further explains that this gift will not only be useful in helping Oliver gain knowledge of ancient records, but also in delivering him out of the hands of his enemies who would otherwise slay him. Just as this same Spirit led the prophet Moses to deliver the children of Israel through the Red Sea on dry ground. In other words, the Spirit of Revelation has broad application. In verses 6 to 11, the Lord instructs Oliver regarding his second related gift, what verses 6 and 7 in our current text refer to as the gift of Aaron. Yet the phrase the Lord used in verse 6 in the earliest manuscript of this revelation was the gift of working with the sprout, and in verse 7, this thing of nature. Later, as Sidney Rigdon was preparing this manuscript for its 1833 printing, he crossed out the words sprout in verse 6 and thing of nature in verse 7 and wrote rod above them. Then, in the 1835 printing of this revelation, Joseph changed both phrases to gift of Aaron, as they now appear in Section 8. What's going on here? Why the changes from the gift of working with the sprout and this thing of nature to the gift of working with the rod and this rod to the now current phrase of the gift of Aaron? Well, it's important to understand that in the 1820s, when this revelation was received, some in society were believed to have the spiritual gift of working with divining rods. Rods made of green, flexible shoots or rods cut from hazel, peach, or cherry trees. Use of such rods dated back centuries and were typically used by those who had this gift to find water and minerals in the ground. It appears that Oliver had used such divining rods in the past, and that this is in fact what the Lord was referring to in verse 6 as the gift of working with the sprout. However, in the 1830s in the United States, there was growing skepticism of objects that could channel divine or supernatural power. Thus, objects such as Joseph's seer stones and Oliver's rod were increasingly suspect as a result of the Enlightenment's hostility toward such things. This could explain why Joseph may have decided not to publish the explicit reference to Oliver's rod in the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants, instead preferring to use the more generic but biblical idea of the gift of Aaron in its place. Yet notice that in this revelation the Lord neither criticizes nor devalues Oliver's gift. Rather, he legitimizes it, first by reminding Oliver how it has already told him many things, and second, by assuring him that it operates by God's power and is a gift from him that he shall hold in his hands. Further, the Lord encourages Oliver to not trifle with this gift, but to righteously use it by way of asking the Lord for knowledge, specifically to learn the mysteries of God and to translate ancient records. All of this, the Lord promises, will be done unto Oliver according to his faith. From the historical record, it is clear that Oliver felt encouraged by D&C 8 and did in fact attempt to translate the Book of Mormon. When his efforts to do so ultimately failed, however, Oliver reverted back to his original position as scribe and Joseph as translator. Shortly thereafter, according to Joseph, A disappointed Oliver was desirous to know the reason why he could not translate as previously promised. Joseph inquired of the Lord on his behalf, and Doctrine and Covenants 9 was the result. The Lord began this revelation gently admonishing Oliver to have patience. He was not to attempt to translate any more from the Book of Mormon, but to be content to scribe for the time being, with the assurance that he would have later opportunities to hone his gift, since there were other records he would be empowered to assist to translate. By other records, the Lord is likely referencing such future translation projects as the Bible revision, which would get underway in just over a year from this time, and the translation of the Book of Abraham, yet a few years out. As to why Oliver had failed to translate when the Lord had clearly authorized him to do so in sections 6 and 8, the Lord explained, "It is because you did not continue as you commenced when you began to translate." Now, it's unclear whether the phrase "began to translate" here suggests that Oliver in fact successfully dictated words which became part of the Book of Mormon English text. In the original Book of Mormon manuscript, there are 28 words written in Joseph Smith's handwriting in Alma 45:22. Some have wondered if this is where Joseph briefly acted as scribe while Oliver successfully began to translate, if only briefly. The documentary evidence, however, can neither confirm nor deny if this was the case. But whatever Oliver's initial success, he did not continue as he commenced. Therefore, the Lord took away this privilege from him. "You have not understood," the Lord explained further. "You have supposed that I would give it unto you, when you took no thought save it was to ask me. But you must study it out in your mind. Then you must ask me if it be right. And if it is right, I will cause that your bosom shall burn within you. Therefore you shall feel that it is right. But if it be not right, you shall have no such feelings, but you shall have a stupor of thought that shall cause you to forget the thing which is wrong." Now if you had known this, the Lord said, you could have translated. Oliver had apparently underestimated both the intellectual and spiritual effort required to receive the level of revelation needed to translate the Book of Mormon. And the Lord added, he feared, meaning perhaps that he feared failure. Hadn't the Lord been clear at the end of section 8 that Oliver's translation efforts would only succeed according to his faith? Sadly, Oliver ultimately failed because he allowed his fears to stifle his faith. "Do not murmur, my son," the Lord had said in verse 6, "for it is wisdom in me that I have dealt with you after this manner." It appears that this entire episode had been orchestrated by the Lord to teach a young Oliver Cowdery priceless lessons best learned by experience. For one, Oliver was now receiving priceless feedback from the Lord with divine precision regarding his personal weaknesses to help him learn and grow. Yet there was another important lesson Oliver was now uniquely positioned to grasp regarding Joseph Smith. "Do you not behold," the Lord asked, "that I have given unto my servant Joseph sufficient strength, whereby your failure is made up?" Having himself tried and then failed to translate, Oliver could now appreciate the extent to which his young colleague Joseph Smith had developed his revelatory gifts. He could now understand with fresh eyes the miracle, the marvelous work and wonder he was witnessing as he sat across from 23-year-old Joseph and watched him translate the Book of Mormon page after page, day after day, and week after week, using only the stones he had received with the record. Of his remarkable time spent as Joseph's scribe during the Book of Mormon translation, Oliver later wrote, "These were days never to be forgotten. To sit under the sound of a voice dictated by the inspiration of heaven awakened the utmost gratitude of this bosom. Day after day I continued, uninterrupted, to write from his mouth, as he translated with the Urim and Thummim, or as the Nephites would have said, interpreters, the history or record called the Book of Mormon." Section 8 encouraged an eager but perhaps naive Oliver Cowdery to translate as he had seen Joseph do. Following his failure, Section 9 offered humbling counsel for this developing disciple of Christ. Herein, Oliver gained valuable insight into developing his own budding spiritual gifts, as well as a deep respect and awe for the miracle the Lord was accomplishing through the spiritual gifts of Joseph Smith. And that's the two-part story of Doctrine and Covenants 8 and 9.